Let me tell you about the synopsis of Old Boy. The Korean movie from 2003 is about a middle-aged guy, Daoism, who one day got mysteriously kidnapped. He was shoved into a room that resembled a room. Cheap wallpaper, thick window feel. I too would have gone crazy. Eat, sleep, watch TV, and being gassed to sleep is a perfect formula for a sedative life, a weaker version of a bedridden life. Rinse and repeat, and time has gone by. If he was there for 15 days, then it could not justify his unruly hair. If he was there for 15 weeks, then it would be too soon for him to hallucinate and cry. If he was there for 15 months, then there would be no need for him to ink his yearly lines. In truth, if they had told him it was going to be 15 years, would it have been easier to bear? When your TV starts to tell time and your clock starts to tell a lie, that means late night news is not news of the night. It is at night and time for the news. Such dilation in time is crystallized in mind. One has nothing but vengeance behind. 15 years of waiting, 15 years of wait. Punches that charge up like thunderous blade. Was it Yong Hae-sam, Lee So-young, or Kang Chang-suk? The culprit will wait while this body ages. 15 years in the making, 15 years of age. 5,475 days. It aged with no grapes, served with no plate. It's just a raw physical body, waiting and wait. And guess what? The moment he got out, the first thing he did was to test out this new body. He pissed on the local gang and punched them in the face. It's a marvelous sight. An unfit middle-aged man stay in an isolated chamber would walk out of it looking younger. The longer he stayed, the better he shaped. Time in this sense does not make him age. It's a catalyst for him to build more of his strength. And this primitive rage is best seen by the famous corridor scene. It was one against the many. With a single drop of a knife, the fight began, hammering all nails to the right place with no sight of escape. It is an exhausting, grueling fight. Even when he got stabbed and everything seems to be done, he just wouldn't let himself out. He just kept on moving, kept swinging, kept punching. 15 years doesn't make you an old man. It makes you an old boy. A physical impossibility is driven by a single motivation: revenge. And this impossibility is of course featured as an Easter egg for a game about aging and fighting. Sifu, just like Old Boy, is a story about vengeance. It is a roguelike game where each time you die, your protagonist ages a little. This is how it works. The game lets the players earn points as they defeat the enemy, and those points are useful for upgrade when the players die. You can use them to unlock new moves that you haven't acquired. It is a gameplay system that quantifies life experience. A learning process that tries to let you learn a lifelong work with a condensed time. A shortcut to death, victory, and knowledge. But age is not just a number. The changes are not just physical. This is why as your character ages, your health bar will slowly diminish. And that's it. That's the only downside. You look older and your health bar is smaller. In fact, quite counterintuitively, you hit harder. You can deal more damage as you age. Is it because as you grow older, you gain more knowledge about the anatomical weakness of the human structure? It doesn't seem like it. You're still hitting the same area. In fact, your character never runs out of breath. His movement is always fluid, dynamic, and can never be dragged down by age. It's a perfect superhuman. While I am busy developing arthritis from smashing my keyboard, a free range of movement is performed perfectly without a bit of sciatica, gout, or osteoporosis. its physical impossibility to act like an old man when you age like an old boy. In both of these media, the use of time and the loss of age is being used like a consumable to strengthen your character. Time span equal experience. The older you are, the more tragic the story. Old age brings you more power for laboring tasks. It provides utility. It is always useful to age. This makes me want to talk about an anime that I've recently watched. Frieren is a fantasy story about a magical elf. Right from the start, it already creates a sharp contrast because magic is not physical, and elves barely age. But just like Sifu and Old Boy, time also serves as an important narrative for the story. Our elf, Frieren, always has flashbacks about the past to contrast what's happening now. A great deal of emphasis is placed on how human and elves experience time differently. When Frieren and her companion go on a journey, she will have no problem spending a few years here and there to do her research and search for a magical item. But humans do not have many few years to spend. The way she and her companion understand time is fundamentally different. And my favorite example is in episode 6. Frieren went to a village that was harassed by a dragon. The dragon was so tough that magic simply deflected off its skin. So Frieren found a local hero for help. His name is Stark, and he was slightly unreliable. He was unreliable because he actually had never fought any monster. He was a coward. Frieren said she can help and defeat the dragon if Stark could buy her 30 seconds. Stark was willing to do it, so it naturally aroused the curiosity of Frieren. Why would someone choose to fight for others when he is a coward? Stark found that question to be strange. In any other story, this would be the time where we insert characters' background story or an incident where the villagers help Stark. But Stark said none of that.
俺はこの村に3年もいたんだぜ。
But Frieren replied,
短いね。
超長えよ。
Time duration is enough to imply emotional connection, a connection that is hard for an elf to understand when 3 years are all so little. But it's not just how Frieren understands time, it's also about how she chooses to use her time. Perhaps it is the longevity of an elf, the ability to live indefinitely, which forces her to spend time on useless magic. This approach to magic caused her to be disliked by another elf, Ciri, an elf mage who knows magic that can make someone rich and powerful. She is someone who has attained an almighty status. So when Ciri asked Frieren, "What's your favorite magic spell?" disagreement arose. Frieren, without hesitation, said,
花畑を出す魔法。
"It is a useless magic that cannot do much. It has no power to destroy, nor the ability to save life. Why would a great mage, or any mage in general, care about such magic?" In fact, it is a habit for Frieren to discover useless magic. She does this all the time. She learned a spell to produce hot tea, a spell that turned a red apple into a green apple, an odd spell that can shave ice. Let me remind you, Frieren is the one who defeated the Demon King. But you will not see that from this catalog of spells. It is a way of approach that even her nemesis, the demons, disagree with. For the demons, magic is like a form of currency, a form of power. The demons will never conceal how powerful they are, because their rank in society is determined by their mana. It is their pride to show off. It is their pride to prove how useful they are. So Frieren and her eccentric spell learning habit are not liked by her own kind and her enemy. And yet, she kept on to walk her own path for ages. There was one point in her life where she even purposely closed off herself from the world to live life according to her own term. Her way of utilizing time and magic makes me want to talk about a certain philosophical concept. Throughout the history of philosophy, there aren't that many people who directly talk about old age. You have Cicero wrote on old age in 44 BC. Then, the topic went silent and took a 2,000-year break until Simone de Beauvoir decided to write The Coming of Old Age as she slowly turned old. This happened most likely because great philosophers in the past died young and couldn't live to experience the later part of life. In addition, it's just a topic that no one cares enough to write about. But depending on the definition, there is a philosopher who tangentially talk about living a long life. The Daoist Zhuang wrote a story about a tree to illustrate the concept of the great use of uselessness. Pause if you want to read it. The gist of the story goes as follows. Huizi, a friend of Zhuang, said he has a large tree, but being large is its only quality. All the carpenters find the tree to be too hard to work with. Even when the tree was planted on the wayside, no one would bother to look at it. Zhuang replied, "Have you ever seen a wild cat or a weasel? It can stay low and leap around, avoiding neither what is high nor what is low. But it too cannot escape the trap of a hunter. On the other hand, there is a yak, which is so large that it can touch the sky, and yet it is too large to even catch mice. So why are you bothered by a large tree which has no use? Why don't you plant it in a wild barren landscape, where there is nothing, so that you can saunter idly by its side, or sleep beneath it with untroubled ease? There will be no acts that shorten its life. There will be nothing to injure it. What is there in its uselessness to cause you distress?" From the story, we can see that it is exactly because the tree is useless so that it can live a long life. In fact, perhaps this is why the tree is a large tree, but not just a tree. Just because something is useless on your end doesn't mean it is useless on its own. And the moral of the story fits with another concept that Zhuang has talked about. A term which is hard to translate can roughly mean to complete our term of years, to enjoy a peaceful long life. Zhuang was trying to tell us, by seeing the great use of uselessness, we can live a good life. Going back to Frieren, we can see how things apply. After all, a tree and a magical elf are not so different. Both lack physical strength, both live a long life, and the great use of uselessness can be seen in how Frieren chose to study magic and live her life. A field of flower is useless on your end, but for her, it's a way to enjoy millennial life. Things can be valuable without being useful. We can just live a quiet life outside and it will still be perfectly fine. It is, however, those who always try to prove their usefulness die first. They always in the end create conflict and bloodshed. But now, one might be asking, if magic for her does not function with apparent utility, then why would she go on a journey and become a heroine? If she didn't really care much about useful magic, then she would have no chance fought against monsters, let alone the Demon King. It seems like her status doesn't match with her intention. And this question actually appears in the sequel of the story of the tree. This time, the story roughly goes as follows. A mechanic walked past a large tree with his disciple. The tree was used as an altar for the spirits, and people around the tree were as crowded as the market. However, the mechanic didn't even glance at the tree, and just walked away. His disciple felt confused, because the tree had the most beautiful mass of timber that he had ever seen. So the mechanic listed his reason. A boat that is made of that wood would sink. A coffin that is made out of that material would rot. Furniture would break into pieces if it was made out of that, etc., etc. And finally, he said, the material is good for nothing, and hence it attained such great age. Later, when the mechanic was sleeping, the tree appeared in his dream. It basically complained, "What kind of tree do you think I am? A pear tree? An orange tree? When their fruits are ripe, they are knocked down for them and thrown among the dirt. The large branches are broken and the small are torn away. They bring destructions to themselves. I, on the other hand, have sought to be useless. It nearly cost my life to do so, and now it has been of the greatest use to me. If I had possessed useful properties, would you think I could grow to the size that I am? In the end, we two are just things. What is the use of passing judgment to each other? How is that you, a useless man, know all this about me, a useless tree? When the mechanic awoke, he chose to discuss this matter with his disciple. This is where the disciple asked an interesting question. If the large tree really is so keen on being useless, then how did it become the altar for the spirits of the land? Isn't that in some way being useful? Is this portrayal of liking uselessness just a form of disguise? It is a very practical question, because in our previous story, Zhuang said, in an effort to embrace our uselessness, the tree should be buried out in the wild, in a barren place. But now in this story, the tree is exactly in the heart of people, standing as a religious altar. So it is a question directly asking Zhuang. Of course, it is easy to proclaim you are useless in the world, but is there great use of uselessness while living in a society? With such conundrum, the mechanic chose to say this. It is a reply which is hard to understand because it's really up to your interpretation. He said, the tree simply happened to grow here, so that people who are ignorant can shame it for that. If it was not used for altar, it would have been cut down. Not to mention, the way it preserves itself is not like others. We should not use our standard to judge it, or else we will be way off topic. From my interpretation, it seems like Zhuang is trying to say, we as human cannot choose our birthplace. Human must be born in a society, or else they will be simply cut down. And as long as you are a functional member of the society, you cannot escape your usefulness. But the point of the story is, the tree never had the intention to be an altar. We should therefore not congratulate it for fulfilling its mission. To do that is to miss the point. The tree has never lost its true self to meet other expectations. The point is still to be aware of your uselessness. Only then you can make sure you are on the right path to live a life with great length and immeasurable bliss. Going back to Frieren, we can see if magic for her is just blindness pursuit of utility, then she and Siri will have no disagreement. And throughout the anime series, she had never bragged that it was her use of magic that brought peace to the world. On the contrary, she said she could defeat the Demon King because she was lucky.
お前のような魔法使いが魔王を倒したとは到底信じられん。
私一人の力じゃないよ。ヒンメル、アイゼン、ハイター、私。一人でも欠けていたら倒せなかった。
仲間に恵まれたか。運が良かったな。
そうだよ。運が良かった。
Even from the very first episode, we were told that Frieren and her love for magic does not start and end with something as grandeur as saving the world. Because right after she and her companion defeated the Demon King, she went on another journey immediately to collect more magic. Magic that she likes. But so far, it seems like I'm saying all these theories with a premise behind. Who said that a long peaceful life can only be achieved through the great use of uselessness. It is true that Frieren could age happily because she invested her time in the uselessness of things. But to only focus on that will be missing the other half. She might not have used her magic to be a heroine, but she did use it for personal purpose. For example, to fulfill hatred. If we go back far enough, we will discover Frieren was living in a time of war. And just like our previous examples, Frieren also has an excuse to fight with vengeance, since the army of demons slaughtered her whole village. It was under such historical background that facilitated her study of magic.
私は魔族に全てを奪われた。
私もだ。
魔族を根絶やしにしたいほど憎い。
私もだ。
けれども私は魔法が好きで。
Therefore, to say that she never invested time to utilize the power of magic would be a lie. She had clear intention to use useful magic. Especially, it was revealed in the story that she spent all this time perfecting one secret technique. She actually purposely approached magic differently compared with the demons. Since demons gain honor through magical power, they naturally look down on others who possess less mana. Consequently, when they belittle you, disregard your presence, it should be seen as a signal to stab them in the back. And this was what Frieren did. The most notable one who fell for this trait is Aura. She was a powerful demon with a specific spell. She can put the soul of a victim and hers on a scale. The one with more mana will tip the balance, and whoever is on the lighter side will lose their agency to their body. Aura, a 500+ year demon, will have no problem squashing any normal human. She spent her whole life training her mana to make sure the house always wins. Just look at how the anime visualized her mana. It was like a roughness of the sea. It surged up in the air like a pillar withholding the sky, while Frieren's mana was like the ripple of a lake, a twig that held no foundation. No matter how you see it, the result is clear. Aura is going to lose. She lost because Frieren spent her whole life suppressing her mana. She knew that one day some demon would underestimate her power and lead her to victory. It is a very stupid way to practice magic, because instead of suppressing her mana, her time and energy could be better spent elsewhere, and the result would be far better. This is not my opinion. This is the opinion of Siri. Siri even said Frieren actually had a low-level skill for her age, perhaps due to her method of training. It is a practice that even Frieren admitted to be stupid, but it is useful. Frieren, in this sense, was like a one-trick pony. She spent her whole life, 1,000 years of experience to prove she was indeed useful for a particular moment in time. And apparently, that time when she lived a reclusive life was also just a plan for her to find the perfect hero to save the world. She was fishing an opportunity this whole time for thousands of years. Thousands of years. It's time beyond human comprehension. Its time folds within time. The volume of years stack up on each other on top of an ethereal base. It's time that makes stones stand, years that make history ends. And yet, she will still stand, waiting until she can kill demons again. This makes me want to talk about the last story of the tree. Yes, the story of the tree is in fact a trilogy. One day, Zhuang and his disciple were hiking, and as usual, a tree appeared. A tree that even the woodcutter ignored. Then we got our usual reply. It is the fact that it is useless, that's why it can live a long, peaceful life. After a while, they came back from the mountain and lodged in the house of Zhuang's friend. His friend was glad to see Zhuang, so he ordered his servant to kill a goose. His servant replied, "There are two geese, one that can cackle and one that cannot. Which one should I kill?" The friend said, "Kill the one that cannot cackle." The next day, the disciple asked Zhuang, "I thought you said it is the uselessness of the tree that makes it live a long life. But the goose died yesterday because it was useless. So master, between these two, where do you stand?" Again, it draws an interesting parallel with Frieren. The Daoists spend so much time on proving the great use of uselessness just to go full circle and show how being useless is dangerous. The whole argument is like a loop, a dialectical process that never ends. Some will argue this goes to show the Taoist position is always relative and depend on context. But I personally am not fond of this interpretation. If at the end of the day, it really is just relative, then why does it just focus on the great use of uselessness, but not on the great use of usefulness too? Remember, in the end, the disciple asked Zhuang to choose between a useless goose and a useless tree, not a useful goose and a useless tree. Zhuang is still committed to his constant flow of negation. I think in order to understand why Zhuang chose to do so, we first need to know the historical background. Daoism, just like Frieren, was born in the time of war. It is what I call wartime philosophy. At that time, a lot of different schools of thought were created, and they all claim you need to do this or do that to restore peace. It's only Daoism and its philosophy that told people, just discover your uselessness. Only by doing that, we can return to nature. But if you are really living in a hostile era, then how can you just be useless in the wild and out of society? If you are like that useless goose, you will be killed without hesitation. Apply this logic to the anime, you can see Frieren as this free soul that gets captured by society, by history. She was bound to be a useful subject, either to the state or to others. Sooner or later, tragedy will occur. Her name will be spread not because of the field of flowers that she made, but because of the time she kills enemy with a skill that took 1,000 years to practice. Even an imaginary mythical creature cannot escape the fact that she is only remembered by her useful side of knowledge, not by what she loves. And there's one really good example that illustrates why a society that only focuses on utility is a bad thing. Why it makes sense for the Taoists to focus on uselessness. And this example starts with a Fable story. It is a largely forgotten story that no one talks about in modern-day Asia. The story usually goes as follows. A family had an elderly parent. He or she was so old that they could no longer work, so they did the only thing they could. Left the elderly in the wild and let him or her rot to death. But there's a turning point. Usually somehow the country had an urgent problem, and the elderly used his or her years of wisdom to easily save the country. It's only after that people realized they should respect the elderly more. On the surface, it seems like it's just a cautionary tale about how we should treat each other. But in reality, there is evidence showing that the practice of abandoning elderly might have once been a tradition in Asia. In India, such stories were told by Buddha. In China, there are legends of caves being used to abandon elderly. In Korea, it's a custom called Huroitsan. In Japan, it's called Ubaste, where people abandon elderly on Ubaste Yama. The elderly were left behind by society simply because they lacked the ability to provide productivity. And according to the logic of the fable, the way for elderly to rescue themselves is by giving back something. What they lack in physical strength will be compensated by intelligence. Once again, things must have hidden utility for us to discover. It cannot be simply they are human, that's why we should not abandon them. All those years that they have spent, all those hours are no longer just human experience. They are quantifiable, calculable units to prove they are intelligent. The longer they live, the wiser they are, thus more useful. But if in the end it saved their life, then why should I care? It is still a win-win situation. Well, let me explain. In 2019, the Swedish horror film Midsommar has a section somehow depicting an Asian tradition in Sweden, a ritual called a distupa. It's a ritual that only elderly participate. It's very simple. All they need to do is... The difference between this story and the usual fable is that the elderly did it voluntarily. They think they were just following the social norm. the social order, because they believe there were 4 seasons in life just like nature, and one must end their own in the last season. This idea of doing the right thing, establishing norm in society, was exactly what other school of thought were doing in ancient China. The Taoists were up against this kind of sentiment. Consequently, in this example, you can see how the idea of uselessness, doing nothing, is actually the better idea. Because you might be doing the right thing at the right place when you were born at the wrong time. You can actually even further expand the idea that happened in Midsommar. The movie Plan 75 from 2022 depicts a fictional policy that was being implemented in Japan. The plan grants the right to death for those who reach the age of 75. It's a plan that the government made for the people. Again, it's totally voluntary. And it's even more humane than what had happened in Midsommar. You have the choice to not participate or withdraw from the last minute. It is a free choice, free of charge, and choice of your will. They have publication and advertisement telling you it's a good policy. It helps the economy. We cannot choose when we were born, but with this, we can choose our own death. This is why my favorite scene is when an elderly walk up to the TV and switch it off, and our protagonist did nothing but gently smile. It's the most genuine smile that I have seen throughout the movie. It's plainly a smile for a blank screen. The saddest part, however, happened in the opening. A young man was holding a gun. It seems like he had just murdered someone. The victims were never shown, but they can be deduced from his speech. Quote, "Too many old people are squeezing the finances of this country. The youth bear all the burden. Even old people no longer want to be a nuisance to society, because the Japanese, since long ago, have been proud to sacrifice for the nation. My courageous act will be the catalyst for everyone to discuss this openly. Let me bring this country to a bright future." We can see here the idea of usefulness is being discussed again. The problem is, when others are talking about utility, they might not have your life in mind. This is why pursuing a life of usefulness is not something that should be taken lightly. If we apply this to the state of war, we can sense why the Taoists were so cautious. Isn't it good to sacrifice yourself and fight in a war as a functional member of the society? Isn't it good to make your nation proud? Isn't it good to take upon your revenge? Isn't it good to be utilized? No wonder why someone like to be a tree, escape everything to live a peaceful life. And the worst thing happened when the story no longer stays in the fictional world. When abandoned mythical tradition decorates itself as a new idea to re-enter the discourse. Few years ago, a Japanese Yale professor suggested that maybe the elderly should just end themselves to save the economy. And somehow, the statement made him popular. Like many things on the internet, he claimed that he just didn't convey his message well enough. Is he telling the truth? Who knows? Who knows? The matter now is, what should be done with the old one? Should we just give them motivation, a single strong belief to stunt their age? Should we delay the retirement age for them to do physical labor, even when osteoporosis can crack the bone? Should we just let them do something non-physical and let them offer the years of experience? Or should we recognize the ludicrous situation that we are in? A society that has had continuous GDP growth for years claim that there are problems with the economy. Men are getting wealthier, and yet we are trying to re-implement the moral code of the past. When will someone realize utility is just a mirage? We just can't stop extracting utility. We just can't be useless and live peacefully for the remaining of our life. Now, great philosophy is always used to tackle great historical problems. So, how can the idea from Daoism help us in this modern day? to rediscover it is okay to be useless. I think there's one good example, a creative example. What you are seeing right now is a restaurant event. You can see that those who are working are elderly. By all accounts, this just seems to be an event where they employ old people to work, to let society know that they can still be part of the workforce. But there's a little twist to this event. 37% of the time, the orders were mistaken, but 99% of the customers were happy. It is a Japanese restaurant called Restaurant of Mistaken Orders, and those who are working have all been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. It is an event that hopes to spread awareness for Alzheimer's patients. But if we link this event to today's topic, you can see how all things play out.
なんか私はね、思うんだ、自分の人生を振り返ってみてね、能力のある人はいっぱいいてもね、そういういい出会いがなかったらね、能力が発揮できないのね。これね、私いい出会いにね、出会えてるのね。
The elderly are not there to prove they are perfectly useful. They make mistakes more than 1/3 of the time. They are not as energized as the young one, therefore perfectly irreplaceable. Nor can this event cure the disease and stop them from aging. It achieves no useful goals, and yet it succeeds on all fronts. This is the point of the great use of uselessness. It's like chasing tomorrow, where you are always second behind. It's a continuous process of chasing where nothing concrete is materialized, but in return, something else shines. In this case, humanity shines.
私は三河和夫と申します。女房の安子です。よろしくお願いします。私はですね、趣味でチェロを弾いているんですけれど、奥さんにする人はピアノの弾ける人っていうことで探してたんですね。そしたらとってもいいピアニストに巡り合いまして非常に楽しんでいたんですけれど、彼女は4年前に若年性認知症というふうに言われてしまったんです。できることがどんどん減ってきて、ピアノを全然弾けなくなってしまったんですね。もう私なんか生きててもしょうがないんじゃないかっていうふうなことを言い出して、それでもやっぱりピアノが大好きだし、じゃあなんとか練習しようねって言って始めたんですね。
いや、もう一回やってもいい？いい
ですか？すいません、ごめんなさい。